In order to get up to town, I've always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Ernest, who lives in Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. And that, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
Oh. And who are the people you amuse?
Neighbours. Neighbours.
Oh. Got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees.
Uncle Jack's brother! But did you tell him that Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He seemed quite anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have had very little experience of it myself up to the present. I have only been married once, and that was a consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes.
Yes, I am quite aware of the fact, and I often wish, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative, in public at any rate. For me, you have always held an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. But we live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. Well, the fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines and has reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. And for me, my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. Is the box I keep all your dear letters in?
My letters? But my dear sweet Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
No!
Oh.
They would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote to me after I'd broken off our engagement were so beautiful and so badly spelled.
In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I will never forgive myself, I placed the manuscript in the bassinet and put the baby in the handbag.
Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
No, sir, I didn't think it polite to listen.
Oh, I'm sorry for that. For your sake, I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
Ooh, and speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
By the way, Lane, I see from your book that last Thursday night, when Lord Shoreman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
8 bottles and a pint, sir.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I've often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens! Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I've had very little experience of it myself up to the present. I have only been married once, and that was a consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I am much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir, it is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I am sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Oh. Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Earnest Worthing.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring anyone anyway? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
Oh, I believe it is customary in polite society to enjoy some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
Oh, what on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people.
And
it is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Neighbours. Neighbours.
Oh, got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire, yes. Yes, of course. Hello. Why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolyn.
How perfectly delightful.
Yeah, that is all very well, but I don't think Aunt Augusta will quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly scandalous. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolyn. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
Oh, I thought you said you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic about proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, but there's nothing romantic about a definite proposal. But one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe, and then the excitement is all over. The essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I get married, I shall certainly try to forget the fact.
Oh, I've no doubt about that, dear Algy. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There is no use speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
But you have been eating them all the time.
That is quite a different matter. She is my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is, too.
Oh, my dear fellow, you need not eat as if you were going to eat at all. You eat as if you were married already. You are not married already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls don't marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
That is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolyn is my first cousin, and before I can allow you to marry her, I must really have you clear up the entire matter of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? I don't know anyone with the name Cecily.
Bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you had let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Oh, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
There is no good offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
Oh, that is very mean of you, Ernest, I must say. Of course, now that I look at the inscription inside, I find the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
It is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends upon what one shouldn't read.
I am quite aware of the fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case was a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you don't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes. Charming old lady she is, too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algy.
Yes, but why does your aunt, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, call herself Little Cecily? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, and some aunts are not tall. That is surely a matter an aunt may be able to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt, and that is absurd. For goodness sake, give me back my cigarette case.
Yes, but why does your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, call you her uncle? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love, to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle? I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It is Ernest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
But you have always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answered to the name of Ernest? You look as if your name was Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I ever saw. It is perfectly absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's written on your cards. Look, I have one here. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. I shall keep this as a proof that your name is Ernest in case you ever attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town, Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
But that does not explain why your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her uncle. Now come, dear boy. You had better have the thing out at once.
My dear Algy, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one is not a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now, I must admit, I have always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist. And I am quite sure of it now.
A Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I shall reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you inform me why you are Earnest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation, and pray, make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle from motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of our admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly, the place is not in Shropshire.
Oh, I knew that already. I have bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now, go on. Why are you Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algy, I don't know whether you will be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough.
Oh?
When one is placed in the position of guardian, one must adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. And as a very high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I've always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Earnest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. And that, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
Oh, the truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were, and modern literature, a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
Oh, literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You'd better leave that to the people who haven't been at a university. They do it so well in the daily papers. No, what you are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you are Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a perfectly invaluable younger brother by the name of Earnest, in order that you might go out into town whenever you choose. I have invented a perfectly invaluable permanent invalid by the name of Bunbury, in order that I may go out into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. It is because of Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for example, that I am able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for I have really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
Oh, I know. You are absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It is so foolish of you. There's nothing that annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. In the first place, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I am always treated as a member of the family, and sent down with either no woman at all, or 2. In the third place, I know exactly who she will seat me next to. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. It is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent, and that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The number of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. Ooh. It will so bad. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you are a Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Ernest, and I would strongly advise you to do the same with your with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Nothing could induce me to part with Bunbury. And if ever you get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you will be very glad to know, Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very difficult time of it.
That is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolyn, and she is the only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. My dear fellow, you don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
My dear young fellow, that is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Oh, yes, and that the happy English home has proved in half the time.
For heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
Oh, it isn't perfectly easy to be anything nowadays. There's so much beastly competition about. Oh, that must be Aunt Augusta and Gwendolyn. Only relatives and creditors ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I can get her out of the way for 10 minutes so that you might have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolyn, might I dine with you at Willis's tonight?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Oh, yes! But you must be serious about it. I hate people who aren't serious about meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I am feeling quite well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Oh, good heavens! You are smart!
I am always smart, and I'm not Mr. Worthing.
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not that. It would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we're a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looked quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolyn?
Thanks, Mama. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers. Not even for ready money.
Oh, it really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
Yes, I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
Well, it certainly has changed its colour. From what cause, I of course cannot say. Thank you. I have quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She's such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, that I won't be able to dine with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your poor uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he's accustomed to that.
I need hardly say a terrible disappointment, but the fact is, I have just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is ill again. They seem to think that I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Oh, yes, Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it was high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to a poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice, as far as any improvement to his ailment goes. I would be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury for me to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has said practically whatever they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I shall speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious. But I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. The music, however, is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen. And if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll show you the program I've drawn out if you will kindly join me in the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful. After a few expurgations, French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think that they are improper, and they are either shocked, which is vulgar, or they laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed, I believe it is so. Gwendolen, you will accompany me?
Certainly, Mamma.
A charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else, and it always makes me so nervous.
Well, I do mean something else.
Oh, I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
Oh, I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into the room that I have often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I ever met since I met you.
Yes, I am quite aware of the fact, and I often wish, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative, in public at any rate. For me, you have always held an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. But we live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. Well, the fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines and has reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. And for me, my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in their name that inspires absolute confidence. By the moment Algernon mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen?
Oh, passionately.
Oh, darling, you don't know how happy you have made me.
Oh, Ernest, my own Ernest.
But you don't mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest.
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it is, but supposing it was something else, do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
Oh, well, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation. And like most metaphysical speculations, there's very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care about the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits
Really, Gwendolyn, I must say, I think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack? No, there's very little music, if any at all, in the name of Jack. It does not thrill, it produces absolutely no vibrations. And besides, I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, have been more than usually plain. Oh, and Jack is a notorious domesticity for John. Ugh. I bet any woman who is married to a man called John, well, she would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. No, the only really safe name is,
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely, you know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you were not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you. But you have not even proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. Why, the topic has not even been touched on.
Oh, well, may I propose to you now?
Oh, I think it's an admirable opportunity. And just to spare you any possible future disappointment, I think it's only fair to tell you beforehand, quite frankly, that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn!
Yes, Mr. Worthing? What have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Oh, yes, I will, my darling. Of course I will. How long you have been about it. I'm afraid you've had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one. I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
Oh, I know, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does, or my girlfriends tell me so. Oh, Ernest, what wonderfully blue eyes you have. Oh, I hope you will always look at me just like this. Especially when other people are present.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you, and Mr. Worthing hasn't quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
Mamma, I am engaged to Mr. Worthing.
Pardon me, you are nothing of the kind. When you do become engaged, your father or I, your father, if his health permits, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she could be allowed to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I'm making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
In the carriage, Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn, the carriage.
Yes, Mamma.
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Oh, thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men, although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to enter your name, should your answers prove what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I do smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
Very good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to marry should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes. It would probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. But between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted of one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. And that's all that can be said about land.
Well, I own a country house, with some land, of course, attached to it, about 1,500 acres, I believe. But I don't depend on that for my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who make anything out of it.
A country house. How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You do have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolen could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back whenever I like at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham, I don't know her.
She goes about very little. She is a lady considerably advanced in years.
Ah, nowadays that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number, Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
I'm afraid I really have none. I am a liberal unionist.
Oh, the Countess Tories. They dine with us, so they come in the evening at any rate. Now, two minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents, Lady Bracknell.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthy, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born into what the radical papers call the purple commerce? Or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said that I had lost my parents. It would be nearer the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me, and he gave me the name of Worthing, because he happened to have a first-class ticket to Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
Where did the charitable gentleman who had the first-class ticket to this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was in a handbag. A somewhat large, black, leather handbag with handles to it. Well, an ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial, sir. I confess, Mr. Worthing, that I feel somewhat bewildered by what you've just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that remind one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As to the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom in a railway station may serve to conceal a social indiscretion. I'm sure it has probably indeed been used for that purpose before now, but it could hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognized position in good society.
May I ask then what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce one parent, at any rate, of either sex, before the season is quite over.
I don't see how I can possibly do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Lisa, what has it got to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would allow our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. For goodness sake, don't play that ghastly tune, Algy. How idiotic you are.
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? Oh, you don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? I know it is a way she has. She is always refusing people. I think it most ill-natured of her.
Gwendolyn is right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we're engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I don't actually know what a gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. At any rate, she is a monster without being a myth, which I think is rather unfair. And I beg your pardon, Algy, I suppose I shouldn't talk about your own aunt in that way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct of when to die.
That is nonsense.
It isn't.
But I won't argue the matter. You always want to argue about things.
Well, that is exactly what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself.
Ooh.
You don't think there is any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algy?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man ever does, and that's his.
Is that clever?
Oh, it is perfectly phrased, and quite as true as anything in civilized life should be.
I am sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left. We have! I would extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course.
What fools?
Oh, by the way, did you tell Gwendolyn about your being Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and to someone else if she is plain.
That is nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
Ugh. Before the end of the week, I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, of course, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You had much better say a severe chill.
You're quite sure that a severe chill is not hereditary or anything of that sort?
Of course it isn't.
Very well. My poor brother Ernest was carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill.
Oh.
And that gets rid of him.
But didn't suppose you say Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a good deal?
Oh, that is quite all right. Cecily is not a silly romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She goes on long walks, has a capital appetite, and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
Ooh. I should very much like to see Cecily.
I shall take great care that you never do. She is excessively pretty. She's only just 18.
Ooh. Have you told Gwendolyn yet about your having an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
One doesn't blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolyn are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I'll bet you anything you like that half an hour after they've met, they're calling each other sister.
Oh, my dear boy. Women only do that after they have called each other a lot of other things first. But if we are going to get a good table at Willis's, we had better go up and dress. It is very nearly 7.
It is always nearly 7.
But I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
What shall we do after dinner? Shall we go to the theatre?
No, I loathe listening.
Oh, well, shall we go to the club?
No, I hate talking.
Well, shall we trot round the Empire at 10?
Oh, no, I can't bear looking at things. It's so silly.
Well then, what shall we do?
Nothing.
Ooh. I like doing nothing. But it is awfully hard work doing nothing. But I don't mind hard work when there is no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word!
Algy, kindly turn me off that. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Gwendolyn, I really don't think I can allow this.
Algy, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You're not quite old enough to do that.
My own darling.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. Whatever influence I held over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and though I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing she could possibly do could ever alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolyn.
The romantic story of your origin is related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name is an irresistible fascination, and the simplicity of your character is exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your address at the town and at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may become necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, would require serious consideration. I'll communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Oh, good, good. Elgin, you may turn round now.
Thanks, I've turned round already.
And you may also ring the bell.
You'll let me see you to your carriage, my own darling.
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going buddying.
Yes, sir.
I shan't be back till Monday. You should put up all of my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
What a perfect pessimist you are.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
Now there's a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever cared for in my life. What on earth are you so amused about?
Oh, I am merely a little anxious about
poor Bunbury is all.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
Oh, I love scrapes. They are the only things in life that are never serious.
That is nonsense, Algy. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Cecily! Cecily, truly the utilitarian occupation of watering flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours, especially when intellectual pleasures await you at any moment. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We shall repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It's not at all a becoming language. Besides, I know perfectly well I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, do you know how anxious your uncle is that you should improve yourself in every way? He laid particular stress on your German before leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays particular stress on your German before leaving for town.
Uncle Jack is so serious. In fact, he's so serious, I cannot think he can be quite well.
Ah, child, your uncle enjoys the very finest of health, and his gravity of demeanor is to be commended in one as comparatively young as he is. I know of no one with a higher sense of duty or responsibility.
That is often why he looks quite bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. And you must remember his constant anxiety over that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would invite that unfortunate young man, his brother, down here sometime. We could have good influence on him, Miss Prism. Well, I know you certainly would. You know, geography and German, and things like that influence a man very much.
I doubt that even I would have much influence on a character that, according to his brother's own admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I'm not sure I should like to reclaim him. I am not in favor of this modern mania of turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. Cecily, I wish you would put down your diary. Indeed, I'm not sure why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary to write down the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't, I might forget them altogether.
Memory, dear Cecily, is the diary we all carry about with us.
Memory is responsible for all the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novels, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? Oh, how wonderfully clever you are. Did it end happily? I hope it did not. I do not like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good end happily, the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so. But it seems very unfair. Was it ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript was unfortunately abandoned. Oh, that is to say, lost or mislaid. But back to your book, child. These speculations prove profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Oh, Dr. Chasuble! Oh, this is a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I do think a short stroll with you through the park, Dr. Chasuble, would do her great good.
Cecily had mentioned nothing about having a headache.
I know, dear Miss Prism, but I felt instinctively that you had one. In fact, I was thinking of that, and not my German grammar when the rector came up.
Cecily, I hope you are not being inattentive.
I'm afraid I am.
That is surprising. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet.
No, we don't expect him until Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. Yes, he likes to spend his Sundays in London. He is not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man his brother seems to be. But I must not disturb the geriander pupil any longer.
Geria, doctor. My name is Letitia.
A classical allusion merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
Doctor, perhaps I will take a stroll with you. I do seem to have a headache, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might walk as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. I find it is rather sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic song.
Now that is, I would like to...
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany W. Uncle Jack's brother. But did you tell him that Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He seemed quite anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Tell Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here, and you better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I've never met a truly wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm afraid he'll look like everyone else. He does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
Some mistake, sir. I am not little. In fact, I believe I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily, and you, by your card, are Uncle Jack's brother. My cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
I am not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I am wicked.
Well, then you have been deceiving us in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you've not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Oh, well, I suppose I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I'm sure it was rather pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
Well, I don't know why I'm here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back until Monday afternoon.
Oh, that is a great disappointment. Oh, but the fact is, I'm obliged to take the first train Monday morning. I have an appointment in London that I am very eager to miss.
Won't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Oh, well, I know how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But I think you'd better stay until Uncle Jack arrives. He'll want to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He went up to buy your outfit.
Well, I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you'll require neckties. He's sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, Uncle Jack said on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Well, the accounts I have of the next world and Australia are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you
good enough for it.
I'm not that. Which is why I was hoping you might reform me. You might make that your mission, Cousin Cecily, if you don't mind.
I have no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
I think it's rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
Oh, I'm feeling better already.
Well, you're looking rather worse.
That is because I'm hungry.
How thoughtless of me. I had forgotten that when one is changing their entire life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Oh, may I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite at all unless I have a buttonhole first.
Marshal meal?
I would sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think you should speak to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things.
Oh, well then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw in my life.
Well, Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that any sensible man would be gladly caught in.
Well, I wouldn't care to catch a sensible man. I wouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You're too much alone, Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope never.
Oh, believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept, as well as the practice of the primitive church, was distinctly against marriage.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, Doctor, that by remaining persistently single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when he's married?
No married man is ever attracted to anyone except his wife.
And often I have heard not even to her.
That depends upon the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. Oh, I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Well, perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing?
Well, this is a surprise. We did not expect you until Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Well, Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
My dear Mr. Worthing, I trust these guards of woe do not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading that life of pleasure.
Dead.
Ernest? Dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he shall profit by it.
Oh, my dear Mr. Worthing, I offer you my most sincere condolence. But at least you had the consolation of knowing that you were always the most generous and trusting of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he seems to have died abroad, in Paris, in fact. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so let him reap.
Charity, Miss Prism, charity. No man is perfect. Even I am susceptible to drafts. The interment 8 days here.
No, he seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
Paris? I'm afraid that shows no serious state of mind at the last. You will no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this terrible domestic objection next Sunday. And my sermon on the meaning of the manna and the wilderness can be adapted to any occasion, joyful or in the present case, distresses. I have preached it at harvest festivals, at christenings, confirmations, days of humiliation, and festival days. The last time I gave this sermon was at the cathedral. Yes, it was for a charity sermon for the benefit of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent among the Upper Orders. The bishop who was there was much struck by some of the analogies that I drew.
Ah, that reminds me. You mentioned christenings, I think, Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen all right? I mean, you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I have spoken often to the poor classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
Is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Warren? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Yes.
Most people who live their lives entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear doctor. I am very fond of children. No, the fact is, I would like to be christened myself. This afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
Well, surely, Mr. Warren, you've been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it.
Do you have any great doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way, or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Oh, you need never mind. You see, the sprinkling, or the total immersion of an adult, is a total canonical practice.
Well, if you're all right with it, I might trot round about 5.
Perfectly, perfectly. You know what? In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A set of twins that recently occurred in a nearby outlying cottage on your own estate. You know, poor Jenkins the carter, he was such a hard-working man.
Oh, I don't see much fun in being christened along with other babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. And now, Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude into a house of sorrow any longer. I only beg that you not be too much bowed down by grief. What often seems as bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me to be a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I am so glad you're back. Oh my, what terrible clothes you've gone. Do go and change them.
Cecily!
My child, my child.
Oh, Uncle Jack. Do look happy. You look as if you have a toothache. I have a wonderful surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother.
Who?
Your brother Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Oh, you shouldn't say that. However badly he behaved to you in the past, you couldn't disown him. I will go out and get him, and you will come here and you'll shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
Well, these are very joyful tidings.
Well, now we have just resigned ourselves to his loss. His sudden return seems particularly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room. I don't know what it all means. I think it is perfectly absurd.
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all of the trouble that I have caused you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, shake hands with your brother.
Nothing would induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor friend Mr. Bunbury, his terrible state of health. And one who is kind to an invalid, there must be good in him. He left the pleasures of London to sit by that thing.
Oh, he's been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he told me all about Mr. Bunbury and Mr. Lowe, Satan help.
Bunbury? Well, I won't let him talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. It's enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Oh, I admit, the faults were all on my side. But I think Brother John's coldness to me peculiarly painful, especially since this is the first time I have come here.
Uncle Jack, if you do not shake hands with your brother, I will never forgive you.
You never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Well, it is the last time I shall ever do it.
It is pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation. I think we shall leave the brothers together.
Yes, Cecily, you will come with us.
My little art of reconciliation is over.
You have done a very beautiful job today.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
Oh, I am very happy.
Oh, Algy, you young scoundrel! You want to get out of this place as soon as possible. I don't allow any Bunbury in here.
I have put Mr. Earnest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right? What? Mr. Earnest's luggage, sir. I have unpacked it and put everything in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Earnest has found himself suddenly called back to town.
Of course, sir.
Oh, what a fearful liar you are, Jack! I haven't been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
Well, I haven't heard anyone call me back.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
Yes, I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who is actually going to be spending a whole week in your house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are not going to be staying for a whole week with me as a guest or as anything else. You have got to leave by the 4:05 train.
Oh, but I can't leave you while you are still in mourning. Oh, it would be very unkind of me. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I think. I would think it most unfriendly if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, but you must be quick about it. I have never seen someone take so long to dress, and with such little result.
Well, at any rate, that is better than being always overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being always immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you have got to catch the 4:05, and I hope you have a pleasant journey back to town. This Bunbury, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. Oh, I'm in love with Cecily. And that is everything. But I must see her before I go and make arrangements for another Bunbury. Ooh, there she is!
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. Aren't you with Uncle Jack?
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
The dog cart? Then he's going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then we have got to part.
I'm afraid so. It is a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has just been introduced. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even the momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
Cecily, I hope I shall not offend you if I state quite openly and frankly that you seem to me to be, in every way, the visible personification of absolute perfection.
Well, your frankness does you great credit, Earnest. May I copy your remarks into my diary?
Do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to read it. May I?
No. It is merely a young girl's record of her thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it comes out in volume form, I do hope you'll order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. Do go on. I'm quite ready for more.
Oh.
Don't cough. When one is dictating, one should speak clearly and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first gazed upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should say that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Oh, tell it to come around next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
I think Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed with you if you staying around next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care at all about Jack. I don't care about anyone in the world but you, Cecily. I'm in love with you. You will marry me, won't you?
Oh, you silly boy, of course. Why, we have been engaged these last 3 months.
For the last 3 months.
Well, yes, it'll be 3 months on Thursday.
But, how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since Uncle Jack told us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, became the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. And you may think me silly, Ernest, but I fell in love with you.
Cecily, when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last, worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to settle the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I determined to accept you under this dear old tree here. And the next day I brought this little ring in your name, and this little bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Did I give this to you? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you have wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've given you for leading such a bad life. And this is the box I keep all your dear letters in.
My letters? But my dear sweet Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
No!
Oh.
They would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote to me after I'd broken off our engagement were so beautiful and so badly spelled. I can hardly read them without crying a little.
Was our engagement ever broken off?
Well, yes. On March 22nd. You may read the entry if you'd like. Today I broke off my engagement with Earnest. I think it better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But why did you break it off? What had I done, Cecily? I had done nothing at all. I think it very hurtful you're breaking off our engagement, especially when the weather was so charming.
Well, it would hardly be a true engagement if it had not been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
Oh, Cecily, what a perfect angel you are!
Oh, you dear romantic boy. Your hair comes naturally, does it?
Oh, yes. With a little help from others.
I am so glad.
Cecily, you'll never break off our engagement again, will you?
I don't think I could now that I've actually met you. Besides, there is the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
Don't laugh at me, darling, but it's always been a girlish dream of mine to marry someone with the name of Earnest. I think it's a name that inspires absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband's name is not Earnest.
But, do you mean to say that you couldn't love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Any name you like. Algernon, for example.
But I don't like the name Algernon.
Yes, darling. Pretty little name for Cecily. I really don't think you should object to the name of Algernon. It is not at all a bad name. It is a rather aristocratic name. Why, half of the chaps in the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, wouldn't you love me?
I might expect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I couldn't give you my undivided attention.
Oh. Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in all the rites and ceremonials of the church?
Yes, Dr. Choswell is a most learned man. He's never written any books, so you can imagine how much he knows.
Cecily, I will see him at once on a most important christening. I mean, on most important business.
Oh?
I shan't be away more than half an hour.
Well, since we've been engaged since February the 14th, and I've only just met you today, I think it rather hard that you should leave me for so long a time as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
Oh, what an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must copy his engagement into my diary.
Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing. On very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Ask Miss Fairfax to come here. And
Yes.
you can bring tea as usual.
Yes, miss, of course.
A Miss Fairfax? She must be one of those old ladies that Uncle Jack knows from his philanthropic work in London. I don't like women who like philanthropic work. I think it's so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. If something tells me we are going to be great friends, then I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
Oh, how nice of you to like me so much after we've known each other such a comparatively short time. Pray, sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you'll always call me Gwendolen, won't you?
If you'd like.
Then it is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity for my explaining who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose.
I don't think so.
But outside of the family circle, Papa, I'm glad to say, is entirely unknown. And that is quite as it should be in my mind.
The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. Well, and certainly when a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. It makes them ever so attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. So, do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, no, Gwendolyn. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You're here on a short visit, I suppose.
No, I live here.
Oh. Your mother, no doubt, or some other female relation of advanced years resides here as well.
No, I have no mother, nor, in fact, any relations.
Indeed.
Yes, my guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, had the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I'm Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh. It is strange. He did not tell me he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. That news does not inspire me with feelings of unmixed delight. Well, I like you very much, Cecily. I've been fond of you ever since I met you. But now that I know you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help stating that I wish you were, well, just a bit older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. If I may speak quite candidly.
Please do so, Gwendolyn. I think that whenever one has something unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, dear Cecily, I wish you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Earnest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honor. Even men of the noblest possible character, though, are highly susceptible to the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history, supplies us with many most painful examples of which I refer. If it were not so, indeed, history would be quite unreadable.
Pardon me, Gwendolyn, but did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, it is not Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his elder brother.
Ernest did not tell me he had a brother.
They have not been on speaking terms for quite some time.
Oh. Well, that accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. Yeah, well, the topic seems distasteful to most men. Oh, Cecily, you've lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if a cloud had been brought across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you're quite sure it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian.
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
I need hardly keep it a secret from you, Gwendolyn, for our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week, but Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily. I fear there has been some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post by Saturday at the latest.
I'm afraid there's some mistake, Gwendolyn, for Ernest proposed to me 5 minutes ago.
Oh, well, it is certainly very strange, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you should care to verify the event, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. I am so sorry, darling Cecily, if it is of any disappointment to you, but I am afraid I have the prior claim.
It would, Gwendolyn, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish, but I am bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has become entrapped into some sort of foolish promise, I shall make it my duty to rescue him, and with a firm hand.
If Ernest has been entangled into an engagement, I will not reproach it with him after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entangled are presumptuous. No, on an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Are you saying, Gwendolyn, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time to have the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
Oh, well, I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is clear that our social circles have been widely different.
Shall I lay tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Very well.
Are there any interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cargio?
Ah, yes. At the top of one of these hills, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? No, I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that's why you live in London.
Quite a well-kept garden, this is, Miss Cardew.
Oh, I'm so glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were flowers in the country.
Flowers are as numerous here as people are in London.
Personally, I don't quite understand how anyone manages to exist in the country if anyone who is anyone does. The country always bores me to death.
That is what they call agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering very much from it these days. Practically an epidemic amongst them. But may I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl. I require tea. Sugar? Oh, no, thank you. Sugar is no longer fashionable.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen in the best houses nowadays.
And this to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and now I ask most distinctly for bread and butter. You have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of another woman, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. In fact, my first impressions of people are invariably right.
Well, you must have many calls of a similar nature to make in the neighborhood.
Ernest! My own Ernest!
Well, darling.
A moment. I must ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily, of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
There has been some mistake, Gwendolyn, for the man whose arm is at present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon.
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack! Oh!
Here's Ernest.
Oh, my own love.
A moment, Ernest. Are you engaged to be married to this young woman?
To what young woman? Good heavens, Gwendolyn!
Yes. Good heavens, Gwendolyn. I mean, to Gwendolyn.
My dear Cecily, what could have put such thoughts into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
My darling Cecily, I fear that there has been some slight error, for the gentleman who is currently embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh! Are you really called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Are you really called John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But yes, my name certainly is John. It has been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on both of us. My poor wounded Cecily. My sweet, wronged Gwendolyn. Oh, sister, will you not? But there is a question I must be put to my guardian. Yes, an admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask you. Where is your brother, Earnest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother, Earnest. So it is of some importance to us to know where your brother, Earnest, is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. Indeed, it is the first time in my life I've ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I'm really quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother Earnest. I have no brother at all. Indeed, I've never had a brother in my life, and I don't have the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Have you never a brother of any kind?
Never, not even of any kind.
Well, it is quite clear to me, darling Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone. It's a very terrible state for a young woman to find herself in, isn't it? Let us go into the house. They shall hardly venture after us there. No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, I suppose.
Oh, yes! And a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is, too. The most wonderful Bunbury in my entire life!
Well, you have no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
Oh, that is absurd. One has the right to Bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburyist, good heavens.
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants to experience any amusement in one's life. I happen to be serious about Bunburying. What on earth you are serious about, I haven't the smallest idea. About everything, I suppose. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite so often as you used to do, dear Algy. And a very good thing, too.
Your brother is looking a little off color, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear off to London as frequently as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either.
But as for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say that you're taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable. To say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
Oh, I can see no possible defense for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady as Gwendolyn, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn, that is all. I love her.
Well, I wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
Well, there is certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think it very likely you and Miss Fairfax will ever be united.
That is no business of yours.
If it was my business, I certainly wouldn't talk about it. It is very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that. And then merely at dinner parties.
How you can sit there, calmly eating muffins when we are in this horrible trouble, I can't make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter might get on my cuffs. One must always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it is perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
Oh, when I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, When I am in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At the moment, I am eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
But there is no reason you should eat them all in that greedy way.
Oh, Jack! I wish you would have tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens, I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden.
But you just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That is quite a different thing.
That may be. But the muffins are the same.
Algie, I wish to goodness you would go.
I can't go without my dinner, Ernest. I never go without my dinner. Nobody does. Nobody ever does, except vegetarians. People like that. Besides, I have an appointment with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I have made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30, and I naturally will take the name of Earnest. Gwendolyn will wish it. We can't both be christened Earnest. It's absurd. Besides, I have every right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence at all that I have ever been christened by anyone. I think it extremely probable I never was, and so does Dr. Chasuble. It's entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I have not been christened for years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you are not quite sure about your ever having been christened, I should think it rather dangerous you're venturing on it now. It might make you very unwell. I need hardly remind you that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off in Paris this week.
I have severe chill. Yes, but you said yourself a severe chill is not hereditary.
I know. It usedn't to be. But I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
Algie, that is nonsense. You're always talking nonsense.
Oh, Jack, I wish you wouldn't. There are only 2 muffins left. Why don't you have some tea cake instead? I never like tea cake.
I hate tea cake.
And why on earth do you allow tea cake to be served to your guests? What ideas you have of hospitality.
Algernon, I have already asked you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
I can't go yet. I haven't finished my tea. And besides, there is still 1 muffin left.
Seems to me to show that they still have some sense of shame left. They're eating muffins. That looks like repentance. They didn't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough? I haven't got a cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery? They're approaching.
How very forward of them. We shall not be the first to speak. Let us maintain a dignified silence. There is nothing left to do.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one. If we will not be the first.
Of course not. Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to say to you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolyn, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
So that I might have an opportunity of meeting you.
satisfactory answer, does it not?
Well, yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't. But it does not change the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it, say, that you might have an occasion of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
Well, I have the gravest doubts on the matter, but I intend to crush them. This is not the time for German skepticism. Well, their answers certainly do seem satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I'm more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspired absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes.
I mean, no. True. I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them that the task will not be a pleasant one?
Couldn't we both speak at the same time?
Ew, a wonderful idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Oh, yes. Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier, that is all.
Our Christian names, is that all? Well, we are going to be christened this afternoon.
You are prepared to do this terrible thing for me?
I am.
You would go through this fearful ordeal for me.
I would.
How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes. When it comes to matters of self-sacrifice, men are far above us.
We are.
They have amounts of physical courage that we women know nothing about.
Darling!
Darling!
Lady Bracknell!
Good heavens.
Gwendolyn, what does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young, physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her at once by a luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I am glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not intend to undeceive him. Indeed, I have never undeceived him on any question. I would consider it wrong. But of course, you will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolyn, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now, as regards Algernon. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend Mr. Bunbury resides.
Bunbury? What? Bunbury isn't here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Oh, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. Poor Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury?
Oh, it's quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he is well punished for his morbidity.
No, Aunt Augusta, he was found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury could not live, and so Bunbury died.
He seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. I am glad, however, that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind at the last to a definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we have finally got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask you, Mr. Worthing, who is the young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me to be a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon.
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know if there is something peculiarly exciting in the air in this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that go on seems to me to be considerably above the proper average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected to any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, SW, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire, NB.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in a tradesman. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They are open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, Markby, and Markby.
Markby, Markby, and Markby? A firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I am told that one of the Mr. Markbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
How extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you'll be glad to know, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and the English variety.
Well, I'm crowded with incident, I see, but perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I myself am not in favor of premature experiences. Gwendolyn, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, I had better ask you, Mr. Worthing, if Miss Cardew has any little fortune?
About £130,000 in the funds. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000 and in the funds? Miss Cardew seems to be a most attractive young lady. Now that I look at her. So few girls of the present day have any really solid qualities, any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come here, dear child. Pretty child. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair looks almost as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvelous effect in a very brief span of time. I remember recommending one to young Lady Hardy. After 3 months, her own husband didn't know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn round, dear child. Here at the side here is what I want. Oh, yes, quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The 2 weak points of our age are a want of principle and want of profile. The chin a little higher, dear. Style depends largely on the way the chin is worn. They're worn very high just at present. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardin's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, prettiest girl in the whole world, and I don't care tuppence for social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend on. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Here, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
Cecily may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
And you may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I am not in favor of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage. Something that I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say an ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more could one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but the fact is that I do not approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible. He is an Oxonian.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I've just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of Perrier Jouet Group 89. Wine I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. What makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he was well aware from the first that I have no brother, that I never had a brother, and that I don't intend to have a brother, not even of any kind. I distinctly told him so myself this afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided entirely to overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, remains unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come here, dear child. How old are you?
Truthfully, Lady Bracknell, I'm 18, but I say that I'm 20 at evening parties.
You are perfectly right to make some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, it will not be long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So I do not think that your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you again, but it is only fair to tell you that under the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come legally of age until she is 35.
Does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest worth who of their own choice have remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. To my own knowledge, she has been 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which was many years ago now. So, I do not think that there is any concern with this engagement.
Algie, could you wait for me until I was 35?
Of course I could. You know I could, darling.
Yes, I felt instinctively that you could, but the problem is I could not wait that long. I can't wait for anything for even 5 minutes, and I am not punctual, you know, but I do like punctuality in others, and to wait, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
Then, what shall we do, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
My dear Mr. Worthing, since Miss Cecily positively states that she cannot wait until she is 35, a remark which I must admit seems to me to display impatience, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
My dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage to Gwendolen, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny that I propose for Gwendolen. We have missed 5, if not 6 trains already. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform. Come, Gwendolen.
Everything is quite ready for the christening.
The christening, sir, is that not somewhat premature?
Well, both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age, I forbid you to be baptized. The idea is grotesque and irreligious. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased to learn that that was the way you wasted your time and your money.
Well, am I to understand then that there are to be no baptisms at all this afternoon?
I don't think that under the circumstances it would be of much value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
Oh, it grieves me to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. These savor from the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views that I have completely refuted in far of my unpublished sermons. However, since your views are particularly secular, I shall leave for the church at once. Indeed, I have just received word from the pew opener that Miss is waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss who?
Miss Prism. Prism, ma'am. Miss Prism. She's waiting for me in the vestry.
Prism? Pray detain me. Allow me to detain you for a moment, sir. This matter may prove of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
Oh, she's the most cultivated of ladies. The very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask you what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
Oh, she approaches. She is nigh.
I was told we sent you in the vestry. You get it?
Prism! Come here, Prism. Prism, where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104, Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained a manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality, but the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that will be forever branded in my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in the perambulator. I had also with me a rather old but capacious handbag, in which I had planned to deposit a manuscript of fiction that I had written in my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I will never forgive myself, I placed the manuscript in the bassinet and put the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Oh, do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
In the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria! The Great Line!
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolyn, wait here for me.
I'll wait for you all my life if you're not too long, my darling.
Lady Bracknell, what does this mean?
I dare not even suspect Dr. Chasuble. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. We are hardly considered the king.
Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
This noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if you were having an argument. I detest arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
It has stopped now.
But he will arrive at some conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Oh, here is the injury it received. Yes, through the accident of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. The lining. Yes, here is the stain. It received from the explosion of a temperance beverage. An incident that occurred in Leamington. And, oh, my initials. I had forgotten that in the mood of extravagance I'd had them placed there. Yes, this handbag is undoubtedly mine. I'm delighted to have it returned to me so unexpectedly. It has been a great inconvenience to have been without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it. You? Yes, mother.
Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? I do not deny that it's a serious blow, but after all, what right do I have to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there has been some error. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive. Would you kindly inform me who I am?
I am afraid that the news that I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. I knew I had a brother. I always said I had a brother. Cecily, how could you have ever doubted that I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Rather than my unfortunate brother. to treat me with more respect in the future. You've never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
Well, I did my best, old boy, though I admit I was out of practice.
My own one. But what own are you? Now that you've become someone else, what is your Christian name?
Good heavens, I'd quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the matter of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
Yes, I never change, except in my affections.
Then the matter had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time when Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished upon you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. That is settled. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present moment recall what the General's Christian name was, but I've no doubt that he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but only in later years, and that was the result of the Indian climate, a marriage, an indigestion, and other things of that type.
Algy, can't you recollect our father's Christian name?
My dear boy, we were not even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army lists of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta?
The General was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life. But I have no doubt that his name would occur in any military directory.
The army lists of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. Generals. Malin, Max Von, Magny, what ghastly names they have. Markby, Migsby, Moggs, Moncrief. Lieutenant, 1840. Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel General, 1869. Christian names. Ernest, John. I always told you, Gwendolyn, my name was Ernest, didn't I? Well, it is Ernest after all. It naturally is Ernest.
Yes, I remember now that the General was called Earnest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest, my own Ernest. I knew from the first you could have no other name.
Gwendolyn, it is a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that he's been telling the truth his whole life. Can you forgive me?
Oh, I can, for I feel you are sure to change.
Gwendolyn, darling.
Oh.
Letitia!
Frederick, at last!
Cecily, at last.
Gwendolyn, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now realized that for the first time in my life, the vital importance of being earnest.